Your constant attention is driving me insane. My girlfriend spat at me, only to panic the moment I pulled away completely, canceling every plan we'd made. Those words struck me like a fist to the chest, especially because they came out of nowhere on what I'd assumed would be just another ordinary Sunday evening. I'm Derek, 29 years old, an investment banker pulling in more than enough to live comfortably in the city. And for 3 years, I'd believed, truly believed, I was building something real with Melissa, a pediatric nurse who poured her heart into grueling 12-hour shifts at the children's hospital. I thought we were aligned, dreaming the same dreams. We'd been scouting houses in the best neighborhoods, scrolling through engagement rings online together, even discussing wedding venues her sister had raved about. Then, the bomb dropped. The second she walked through the door after her girls' weekend in Miami with her friend Kennedy, I knew something was off. I was making dinner, actually excited to hear about her trip, to show her the mortgage pre-approval letter that had arrived while she was gone. "We need to talk," she said, dropping her bags with an energy I'd never seen from her before. I turned off the stove, bracing myself. Had something terrible happened? But instead of bad news, she launched into this tirade about how my obsessive behavior was suffocating her. I stood there, stunned. She was talking about the lunches I brought her during her shifts because the hospital cafeteria food was garbage. About the times I remembered her toughest NICU cases and made sure to be there for her emotionally. About the surprise date nights I planned after her most brutal weeks. "Derek, it's too much." She paced the living room like a caged animal. "The way you track my schedule, the way you just show up with coffee when I'm stressed, it feels controlling, obsessive." I couldn't believe it. These were the exact things she used to brag to her friends about. The things her coworkers called thoughtful. The things that made her feel so loved and supported. Just last month, she'd told her sister I was the most caring boyfriend she'd ever had. "That was before I realized how unhealthy it was," she shot back, her voice sharp. "Kennedy helped me see that normal relationships don't work like this. You're supposed to give each other space, to exist as individuals." Kennedy, the recently divorced real estate agent who'd burned through 3 marriages and wore her cynicism about men like a badge of honor. Of course, her fingerprints were all over this sudden personality shift. "What exactly do you want me to change?" I asked, desperate to understand what boundaries she needed. But instead of clarity, she grew defensive, evasive. "See? You're interrogating my feelings right now. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't just accept what I'm saying, you have to analyze it to death." The conversation spiraled from there, her accusing me of guilt-tripping her for wanting independence, me sitting there, bewildered, trying to figure out when caring about someone's well-being had become a character flaw that needed fixing. So I made a decision. I would give Melissa exactly what she'd asked for: complete, emotional distance. The next morning, I didn't bring her coffee before her early shift like I had every single day for the past 2 years. No good luck texts before difficult procedures, no check-ins during her lunch breaks, no foot rubs when she came home exhausted, no Thai food from her favorite place. I treated her like a polite roommate, nothing more, nothing like the woman I'd been planning to propose to in 6 months. That luxury couples retreat to Napa Valley I'd spent 3 months organizing? I called the resort and transferred the reservation to my firm's annual company retreat instead. My colleagues were thrilled about the upgrade. If Melissa wanted space, she probably didn't want to spend a romantic weekend hashing out our relationship anyway. And when her car started making that grinding noise she'd ignored for weeks, when she mentioned it with that expectant look, like she was waiting for me to step in and fix it, I just shrugged. "Sounds frustrating. You should probably call a mechanic." The shock on her face was almost comical, like she couldn't believe I wasn't immediately dropping everything to solve her problem. At first, she seemed relieved. "This feels so much healthier," she announced after a few days, stretching out on the couch like she'd been freed from some invisible prison. I can actually breathe in this relationship now. Kennedy was right about how important it is to maintain your independence. But by the end of the first week, the complaints started creeping in. "You seem really distant lately," she said over dinner, eaten in silence because I'd stopped asking about her day. "I'm giving you the space you requested," I replied, not looking up from my plate. "That's not what I meant," she snapped, frustration edging into her voice. "I meant emotional space, not complete indifference." I found that fascinating. What was the difference exactly? Was I supposed to care but not too much? Show interest, but not obsessive interest? Support her, but only in ways that didn't actually make her feel supported? The mental gymnastics were exhausting. So I stuck to her original request: space. By the third week, Melissa's complaints had escalated into full-blown accusations of emotional abuse. She cornered me one evening when I got home from work, blocking my path to the kitchen with this wild, almost frenzied look in her eyes. "We need to have a serious conversation about what you're doing to this relationship," she declared, like she was staging an intervention. What followed was a 2-hour marathon of her simultaneously demanding that I care about her and insisting that my previous ways of caring had been completely inappropriate and controlling. "You're punishing me," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "You're using silent treatment and emotional withdrawal as weapons because I asked for healthy boundaries." I sat there, listening to this elaborate victim narrative she'd constructed, where my decision to respect her stated wishes somehow made me the villain. "Melissa," I said calmly, "you literally told me my attention was driving you crazy, that I was being obsessive. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for." "But you're supposed to fight for us," she exploded. And there it was, the real expectation, buried beneath all her talk of independence and space. She hadn't wanted me to actually change. She'd wanted me to argue with her, to beg her to let me keep loving her the way I always had. This was some kind of test, and I'd failed it by taking her at her word instead of playing her games. "So you wanted me to ignore your boundaries and keep doing the things you called controlling?" I asked. "You're being deliberately obtuse," she accused, which seemed to be her go-to response whenever I pointed out the contradictions in her position. "Normal boyfriends would be concerned when their girlfriend says she needs space," she seethed. "They'd want to understand what's wrong and work together to fix it." The irony was staggering. When I had tried to understand and work together, she'd called me obsessive. When I'd respected her request for space, I was emotionally abusive. There was no way to win this game because the rules kept shifting based on whatever would make me wrong. Later that week, I discovered she'd been documenting my cold behavior, sending screenshots to Kennedy, who was validating every complaint, coaching Melissa to see herself as a victim of psychological manipulation. "He's definitely punishing you for setting boundaries," Kennedy had texted. "Classic narcissistic behavior. Document everything." I found the thread when Melissa left her phone on the counter while showering. Page after page of Kennedy coaching her on how to interpret my every action as proof of malicious intent, turning my respectful compliance with her wishes into evidence of my hidden cruelty. The woman who destroyed 3 marriages was now systematically dismantling mine, and Melissa was eating it up like gospel. The situation reached a new level of insanity when Melissa decided to involve my family. I came home from work one Thursday to find 17 missed calls from my mother, each voicemail more panicked than the last. "Derek, honey, please call me back immediately," her voice shaking. "Melissa called me this afternoon, and I'm so worried about you." When I called back, my mother was in tears. "She said you've been having some kind of psychological breakdown," she sobbed. "She thinks you need professional help." The audacity took my breath away. Melissa had painted herself as the concerned girlfriend trying to save her boyfriend's sanity, when she was the one who demanded I change my entire personality, then raged when I actually did it. "Mom, let me explain what's really been happening," I said, and spent the next hour walking her through the entire nightmare. My mother listened in stunned silence as I described how Melissa had spent months positioning herself as my future wife, while simultaneously claiming she needed freedom from our relationship. "That girl has been talking about wedding venues with me for months," Mom said, disbelief thick in her voice. "She showed me engagement ring photos on her phone last week. What kind of person does that? Then turns around and says she needs space." The family interference backfired spectacularly, because now my parents saw exactly what I'd been dealing with. But Melissa wasn't done. Over the weekend, she launched into full love-bombing mode, cooking elaborate meals I hadn't asked for, wearing my favorite outfits, initiating physical intimacy, acting like the girlfriend she'd been before Kennedy's poison took hold. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me over candlelit dinner, the flickering light casting shadows across her face, like some romantic tragedy. "Maybe I was too harsh about the attention thing. I do appreciate how much you care." But when I didn't immediately snap back into boyfriend mode, her mask started to slip. By Sunday evening, I could see flashes of genuine rage breaking through her performance, whenever I maintained the emotional distance she'd originally demanded. The breaking point came when I overheard her on the phone with Kennedy while I was in the bathroom. "He's not responding the way you said he would," Melissa whispered urgently. "I've been doing everything, cooking, dressing up, being affectionate, and he's still acting cold." Kennedy's voice was loud enough that I could hear her through the speaker. "Then you need to escalate. Make him think he's losing you completely. Men like Derek only respond to the threat of abandonment." I stood there, frozen in my own hallway, listening to them strategize, plotting how to psychologically manipulate me back into compliance. And in that moment, I finally understood. This had never been about healthy boundaries or independence. This was warfare, and I was the target. The next day, I did some digging into Kennedy's past, and what I uncovered was chilling. Through mutual connections and some careful research, I learned that Kennedy had been married and divorced 3 times, each ending because of her infidelity and manipulative behavior. Her philosophy seemed to be that any man who treated a woman well was secretly controlling, and needed to be tested until he either became abusive or walked away. She'd been systematically poisoning Melissa's mind for months, convincing her that my genuine care was actually a sophisticated manipulation tactic designed to control her. During our next confrontation, I laid it all out: Kennedy's influence, the texts, the manipulation, and Melissa finally broke. "Kennedy said that men who are too attentive in the beginning are always hiding something," she sobbed. "She told me that if you really loved me, you'd fight harder when I pushed you away, and the fact that you just accepted my request for space proved you were probably relieved to have an excuse to care less." The twisted logic was breathtaking. I was supposed to become the controlling, boundary-crossing boyfriend Kennedy had predicted I'd reveal myself to be, thus proving both of them right about men in general. My failure to become abusive or desperate was somehow evidence that I didn't love her enough. "I only truly wanted you when I thought I was losing you," she admitted. And there it was, the core truth that made continuing this relationship impossible. She didn't love me. She loved the security of having someone devoted to her, and she only valued that security when she thought it might disappear. I ended things the next morning. I asked her to move out within the week, which, predictably, led to her staying with Kennedy in what I knew would be a predictably toxic living situation. The irony of her moving in with the woman who'd destroyed our relationship wasn't lost on me. But by then, I figured they deserved each other. Within days, Melissa launched a full smear campaign through our mutual friends, painting me as an emotionally abusive partner who'd manipulated her into thinking she was crazy for wanting healthy boundaries. But the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when you're dealing with someone as unstable as Kennedy. About 3 weeks after Melissa moved out, I got a text from our mutual friend Sarah. Melissa and Kennedy got into this massive screaming match. Melissa stormed out and blocked Kennedy on everything. Apparently, She finally realized Kennedy's advice destroyed the best relationship of her life. And when she confronted her about it, Kennedy just said, "I was trying to give you some self-respect. If he really loved you, he would have fought harder." That's when Melissa finally saw it. She'd been manipulated by someone who gets off on sabotaging other people's happiness. But by then, it was far too late. Meanwhile, I was having the time of my life on that Napa Valley retreat with my co-workers, feeling a genuine peace and freedom I hadn't known in months. The luxury vineyard resort was stunning, and for the first time in ages, I found myself laughing, relaxing, like an invisible weight had been lifted off my chest. My colleagues kept commenting on how different I seemed. More confident, more at ease, like I'd been carrying something heavy and was finally free. Melissa's final, desperate attempts to reconcile came through increasingly pathetic text messages from new phone numbers, through mutual friends she'd enlisted to plead her case. She says she's learned her lesson, Sarah told me over coffee. She wants you to know she'll never let anyone influence her against you again. But I was done. Done being someone's learning experience. Done proving my worth to someone who only valued me when she thought she was losing me. And definitely done with someone whose idea of personal growth required destroying our relationship first.